an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Trickster Drift, chapters 26, 27, 28, and 29. Fireflies Redux, I Didn't Choose the Mod Life, Superfly, and Nika. In these chapters, Jared sees Sarah again, and something super weird happened to her. Not only did it happen to her, but Jared seems like he fixed it. And he insists that he didn't. But Jared, I think if we've all seen, isn't too bright when it comes to magic and his own abilities. And I kind of think he did. And then he meets another otter. That freaked me out. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So thank you very much to Robin for commissioning this episode and for bearing with me with my filling in the gaps of when I recorded a slightly longer episode previous to this one. These chapters were really quick. And I don't mean that they're shorter. I always do 50 pages, but I mean that I kind of flew through them because I was really interested. It was such a I tried to explain this book and the previous book to Owen, because there was a moment during which I was having a really strong reaction while reading in the same room as him. And I wanted him to get why I was having that reaction. And in trying to explain any of it, I sound like I'm describing some sort of fever dream. Like it just doesn't sound like anything, you know? But I have found myself so invested in Jared's well-being and so appreciative of the people in his life right now being better than the people that he was forced to grow up around, that I am experiencing the type of caring about a character that I find to be sort of rare. And it's like, there are plenty of characters that I care about, but there's another level that you reach when you really desperately want somebody who is not real to get something specific, which is also not real. And you just feel it in your bones, like this character represents something for you. And I think that's really part of it, is that for me, Jared represents everybody who is in a garbage situation, not of their own making. And he has done everything right since getting himself to AA. Well, being brought to AA. He has seen that he had a problem, decided to keep going back, stayed sober, tries to take care of himself. And the only thing that I can say that he probably could do better is keeping people around him aware of what's going on with him. But he is afraid to be a burden or afraid for other people to overreact. So I can't even really blame him for handling that the way that he does. I think he could have done it better, but that's not to say that it's actually a bad way to handle things. So I think that's part of it, is that Jared is the kind of character that, because they've done everything right, because they've made smart choices that you understand, you almost feel like you are Jared. It's not the same as okay, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the thing about characters that, for me at least, and I think this rings true for a lot of people, that makes you not care about them, or at least be less invested, is when they make decisions that you yourself would not make. And so inevitably it leads to some sort of disaster. And there is a part of you that remains very detached from that, because you're just kind of like, well, of course this went wrong. You should have done X. I was saying you should have done X. You should have listened to me, character that was written 20 years ago that I have no influence over. But instead, you decided to just do this stupid thing, which I don't get why you made that choice. It doesn't make any sense. And of course, everything went wrong. So you don't have that same sort of like, well, this I guess could happen to me. With Jared, it's like he is doing the things that I would do in his place. So I want him to succeed because I want reassurance that I can also succeed in the world, regardless of what I'm actually trying to accomplish, because I'm making like sane, smart decisions. And what I really enjoy about Jared's story is that almost the probably 70% of the story at this point is dealing in magic, which is stuff that he has a lot less control over. So he has done everything right, in quotes, in regard to his like day-to-day life, getting by, staying sober, getting a job, continuing to like, you know, pull his weight and contribute to his household. He has done all of that right. But the magic is the thing that he is really like not getting on board with the way that I feel he needs to. But this is not something that I can get as angry with him about because I have no frame of reference for this, you know, and him not handling the magic the right way. He at one point in this series of chapters points out the toe that got bit off to Sarah. And it's like, see, this is what happens when you fuck with shit you don't understand. Like, it's not just a little thing that can, oh dear, I started a small fire that I was able to put out with a fire extinguisher. You could die. This isn't a joke. So in that respect, when he makes bad decisions, in my opinion, regarding magic, I am a lot more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt and some slack on that. And I'm not always sure that I even have the right knowledge because he is an indigenous person that is dealing with magic stemming from indigenous myths and legends and, you know, history. I don't know about any of these myths, legends, or history. So I can't come at this with any sort of certainty at all. And this is actually something I meant to ask Robin whenever you listen to this. If you know of a good resource for finding out about the stories that pertain specifically to whatever band he is a part of or whatever band's like, you know, this mythology in this book seems to be drawing from, I would love it if you would point me towards it as long as it's not spoilery. I don't know why it would be, but you never know with stuff like that. Because I would just like to get a little bit more background on exactly what we're dealing with here. There is so little about any sort of Native American legend that I really know about. Like, I got taught the same old ones that were assigned to Native Americans at large rather than a particular tribe or nation. You know, with like the earth is on the turtle's back, yada, 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 yada. All this stuff that's very generalized and essentially meaningless. These sorts of stories, no familiarity to me at all. And I am really interested in them because when you are dealing with a lot of other mythologies that are coming from, you know, Europe, for example, even the Middle East, there are hugely familiar themes and characters that sort of fit into a, what's the word I want? Like a template. And even if you don't know the characters by name, a lot of like the legends and mythologies will be vaguely familiar in their way. Even stuff that's coming from, you know, Asia and India. But the stuff that we have encountered in this book so far is absolutely alien to me. The notion of painting like these faces on the wall for protection. No idea. Like, I have no idea what they are supposed to represent, why they do what they do. The only thing that I am at all familiar with is the idea of smudging a space with sweetgrass or sage in order to, you know, banish evil energies and spirits and whatever. and using like the abalone shell and the eagle feather for that. That's it. And otherwise, all of this stuff is coming at me from complete left field because I have no context for any of it. And I'm not complaining. I don't want you guys to think that this is like, to me, a fault of the book. I'm actually really enjoying that aspect of it because it's so before I just bear with me a little bit longer. The other day in the patrons group, somebody asked for everybody's hot takes. And I said that I found Neil Gaiman to be really overrated. And this is like, I'm not somebody who has read a ton of his work. But of the things that I have read, the only thing that really felt truly original and made me understand what people like about him was Neverwhere, which I covered for the book club with Miles. Other than that, the things that I have read from him have all seemed to really draw on these like mythologies that are extant already, and he just puts his like weird spin on them. Sandman is like, it's probably the most creative that he has gotten with those, but there's still a lot of stuff that already existed. There's the whole thing with like, Midsummer Night's Dream, which I didn't really get. There's just, I find him, because of the fact that he draws from mythologies that I'm very familiar with, I find him to feel a little bit played out, and I'm not always that excited or taken by surprise by the turns his stories take. I mean, the end of American Gods was something that I had personally come up with and was going to use in a story that I was writing. So when I came to the end of it and realized what he was doing, I was like, oh, this is the thing. Like, I just have not been impressed. But this book, because this mythology is something that I don't know of at all, and is so like set up in such a strange and specific way, I am finding myself taken off guard all the time. And the fact that other people within the context of the story do seem to know what is going on, or at least the basics of it, is what I find really fun. So yeah, I'm really digging this. So all right, I'm going to back it up and let's start off with chapter 26, Fireflies Redux. So Jared goes home, and he gets the cast iron patio set and brings it to Olive's apartment because she's the one whose husband was owed all this money, and his friends showed up and took his friends, in quotes, showed up and took all of their furniture away to pay his debt. So they don't have anything in there. And he is, a little saddened to see the really, really old TV that they're using. I think there is like, I don't even think there's a couch. Yeah, because Eliza's like in a sleeping bag on the floor. So it's just really like an empty, sad scene. It took 7 men to get that damn TV in here, Kokum Darlene said. Let him try to steal that. So he hangs out with them and is just kind of like reaching out to people in a way that, not that we haven't seen from him before, but in a way that is new for this location, I think. He has been reticent to even really let Maeve in, and it's finally happening. And I feel like these moments are a good sign that he's starting to not only trust other people, but trust that he's going to be here for long enough that these investments are worthwhile, if that makes sense. And it says, he took a few pieces of the fried bannock out for Coda, who remained passed out. He put a few aside for Justice in case she dropped by. The bannock was still warm and there was still enough to feed an army, so he decided to take the rest of it over to Barbie's place. Barbie's oldest daughter, Bernadette, was home and bored, babysitting the 2 younger kids who weren't in school yet. So generally he's just kind of like making the rounds, and she tells him that Pat and Sponge are tech support at some computer store. And he's really surprised because they don't really talk about themselves. They're kind of the comic relief in the background a lot of the time. And not even real comic relief because they're not actually funny. They're just annoying. So they're kind of like the little brothers. And when he hears that they have like jobs, he's really startled because it says he had assumed they were still in high school. And I had to be like, well, you know, you don't know that they're not. I had a job when I was in high school, but probably not. And then he goes to the cafe, gets himself a latte as a treat, checks his phone, and Maeve is going to be coming home from her vacation that she took to write, that she was trying to get him to come with her on. And he goes to a meeting, and Lex comes and sits next to him, and he asks if she wants to hang out, and she says, "Ugh, don't smother me," and leaves. Lex, girl, get some therapy, all right? Jared, meanwhile, this whole thing is so... He goes to the airport to pick Maeve up, because Justice asked him to last chapter. And when she hears that Coda is staying with them, she tries to talk to him about the fact that he's not responsible for Coda. Excuse me. And he doesn't really answer her about that, but it's an interesting sort of response from her because she is so... I mean, it's Justice, I think, who tells him she has a tendency to collect strays. So the fact that she is saying this about Coda, I found really surprising. I won't say it was out of character. I think it's just her, like, when she says who you're responsible for, he is somebody that was like family. And so she feels responsible for him. I don't know what caused her to feel the responsibility toward Justice initially, but Justice had told him that, you know, she's been officially adopted. So that's a whole other thing. Coda is somebody that's fairly new to the scene. And I feel like that's part of Maeve's deal, is that he's not really anybody to any of them. So to take up this cause to help him feels really like assuming too much, being almost presumptuous. So yeah, I really would like to hear from her in a little bit more detail where she decides to draw the line on this. So he takes her to see Justice, and they are very, very excited to see each other. I mean, she's only been gone a couple days, but Justice got her car redone and like installed the whole thing in her room. So Maeve is just really touched by all of this. And Sarah, Maeve drops him off at the house and goes off with Justice. And Sarah shows up at Jared's house, and he's not really surprised to see her, which I can't remember if she said that she was coming by, but I was very surprised that she turned up. And she's wearing, you know, her usual like sort of weirdo outfit that she tends to wear. We find out a little bit later that she was having... She had a wig on, and that she was doing the whole Ziggy Stardust thing, but she took the wig off, and at this point is just wearing the like jumpsuit and the makeup. And he notices that she doesn't have the fireflies above her head, and immediately is like, "Oh, you're not Sarah. I'm not letting you in." And she says, guys, I'm just going to read this. This is so crazy to me. He says, "You're not Sarah." She says, "They're gone." Her shoulders heaved and she leaked tears. "He ate them, and then he left me." "Who ate them?" "He said he was a medicine man. I couldn't stop him. He disappeared and he took them. I felt them leave." "Are any of them left? Can you see any of them?" She bent over, sobbing. Jared reluctantly led her inside and sat her at one of the kitchen chairs, and then sat beside her. He didn't feel like she was a fake Sarah, but it was weird seeing her without her fireflies. "I killed them," she whispered. I got them killed. So later on, he brings her into his room and they sort of like lay together on his bed. They don't have sex. There's no like, I won't say there's no sexual tension. There's just no feel between the two of them that either of them is expecting anything to happen or even thinking about it. And she says, he seemed like a good guy. I thought he was my friend right up to the moment his jaw unhinged and he started eating them. He put the rest of them in some kind of bag and disappeared. Poof. Guys, what? Excuse me? What the fuck does something like that? This is what I'm talking about in terms of like not knowing anything about a mythology and not being prepared. Something ate her fireflies. How? How? Why? How does it... dislike. I don't even like the fact that this is a thing that can happen that is out there that she needs to be worried about. And he's laying there thinking about whether the fireflies suffered, if they felt pain. He didn't like them, but he didn't want them eaten. If any of them were alive, he hoped they found their way back to Sarah. He hated to see her suffer like this. And then, all of a sudden, about a dozen of them reappear above her. And Sarah can feel that they came back. Like, she doesn't see them, but she can tell. And says, what did you do? And he says, I didn't do anything. They just appeared. And she says, you did something. And the fireflies say thank you to him. And Jared says, I didn't do anything. The painted heads had done something. They had read his mind, or the fireflies had just come back. It wasn't him. He wasn't responsible. He didn't even like the pompous little asses. Thank you, she said. I knew you could help us. Jared, listen, buddy. Look, Jared. Let's be real with each other here, okay, for a second. Can we just, talk? Jared, buddy, you have got to start facing facts here about the shit that happens around you and all of the shit people say to you. You've got to start putting the pieces together and realizing that while you may not have any actual training, you may not have, the background knowledge that you need, there is obviously something about you that is very powerful, and you have abilities that are rare. So rare, in fact, that a god took you to a barbecue and didn't expect you to be able to see everything that you saw. You surprised a god. And yet you keep on trying to act like you don't have abilities, that you don't know what's going on, that everything is like a total surprise. Jared, buddy, you're not fooling anybody except yourself, and you need to stop fooling yourself, because as much as I respect what you were trying to say to her about magic being dangerous, and if you mess with it and you aren't ready, you'll get yourself killed, as much as I know and understand that, and I completely acknowledge it, having the kind of power that you have and continuing to remain ignorant of everything is just as dangerous, and you're going to need to get a handle on this, buddy. Because you're living in a place with the kind of power that other supernatural beings are freaked out by, as we see later. Dude, get your shit together, all right? I'm starting to get impatient here. You need to start dealing with the situation. You can't just be in denial about everything forever and expect to stay sober, because being sober requires honesty. It requires facing up to your situation. And if you're not willing to do that, it's just a matter of time before shit starts to get fucked up for you again. So he's making some food when he gets up later on. And Coda is there, yelling basically at him about how he found another place to stay. I'm not your fucking problem. Everyone can calm the fuck down. Dude says, just chill. And Coda says, suck up. You'll say anything for free rent. And then just leaves. And I'm like, dude, what does that even mean? First of all, he isn't, his rent isn't free. Maeve isn't making him pay, but that's not something that he asked for. He would have paid if he could, and he's really contributed a lot outside of paying for rent with all of the cooking that he does, putting furniture together. He does a lot. So Coda's like jab right there is really kind of meaningless. And also the suck up. Who's he sucking up to? Chill? He says chill, okay, dude? And Coda calls him a suck up. What are you even talking about? You fucking psycho. So at this point, the slithering stopped. Jared covered the shepherd's pie loosely with tin foil. He hears the thing in the wall. He went back to his room and crawled into bed beside Sarah. She made an annoyed sound, then flung an arm over him. The fireflies had perked up and were spinning faster, brighter. The painted faces in the wall watched the fireflies suspiciously. He liked having Sarah here. He didn't even mind the fireflies. They glowed. His eyelids shut and he listened to her breathing. He heard Justice and Maeve come in, their laughter. He drifted. When he woke again, Sarah was checking her phone beside him. So I really like this ease that they have between them, but I was also worried that they were going to like get back together, and I do not feel like that's a good idea because Sarah is just embracing this whole idea of magic in a way that Jared is unwilling to do yet, and I feel like that's, until he gets on the same page as her, it was just going to feel like she was using him, which she says later she considered doing. Part of the thing with this like medicine man was going to be brewing a love spell that would make him do whatever she wanted. And she says, first of all, it felt rapey, but second of all, I just don't think I would have had the juice to pull it off in the first place. And Jared's like, well, you're talking about a love potion, but it's not like I didn't love you. That wasn't the issue. And I like that he said that because I feel like that really gets, you know, people do seem to think a lot of the time that love and just doing whatever someone wants are the same thing. And that's not what it is. If somebody does what you want all the time, that's not love. There's something wrong there with one of you or both of you, most likely both. And Sarah, like, I respect that you have decided to go off on your own and try and figure shit out for yourself. I actually do. The fact that she went to other people and tried to get some resources together, she doesn't have a whole lot of options available to her. She doesn't have a lot of money to travel around. But also, yeah, she's really courting danger here, you know? And I imagine this isn't the last of it. There's mention later of when they kiss before he drops her to take her plane to go and see Mrs. Jax, that it feels like a goodbye kiss. And I don't know if I buy that, but I guess we'll see. So Maeve and Sarah meet, and Maeve, like, totally unsurprisingly, is delighted with Sarah. Just, you know, the way the two of them are about activism and capitalism and the upper class and the white man and everything lines up completely. They're both 100% right. Also, I would like to add, there has been very little that either of them have said that I don't 100% agree with. And he goes and leaves them to chat because he can hear the fireflies and they're distracting him. So he claims he has a headache and goes off by himself. And the fireflies follow him. And they say to him, this is how we live in a world run by thugs who think a mind is just a weapon. Which I don't know what that is about. And they say this, and then it says the walls of Jared's bedroom trembled like the horizon on a hot day, like the air above a fire. The faces painted on the mural blinked, began to vibrate, and then spun madly as if they were possessed and about to spew bile. The fireflies flattened into a single layer. They hovered just below the ceiling. The faces on the walls screamed all at once. "What the hell?" the fireflies said. So Jared goes over and gets the big book and starts to read over the 12 steps, which is apparently his version of like the Lord's Prayer to kind of calm himself down. And the fireflies are yelling about how they want to go home. The faces stop moving and go silent, and he looks up and the fireflies have left. He could hear them back in the living room, snapping like mosquitoes hitting a bug zapper, but at least they had stopped trying to talk to him. The faces bobbed around the wall. I am dying to know what the fuck that was. There are a couple of things that I can sort of get the gist of it, and I feel like I would like an explanation, but it's not totally necessary. I kind of feel like I get what happened. This is not one of them. I really don't know here. When the fireflies say we want to go home, it's sort of confusing because they were following Jared. He didn't summon them. He didn't ask them. They followed him for whatever reason. It's almost like they were going to do something. They were following Jared in order to do something, and the faces defended Jared from an attack from them. But I would have thought that Jared would have sensed them trying to attack him, like mentally. And it doesn't seem like he did. So I don't know. Yeah. And he's like laying there sort of worried that Maeve and Sarah are going to hear what happened. But they don't seem to sense anything. And he's laying there and he says, it says he felt safe in this room. Jared wasn't sure what that meant. He wished he could talk to someone, but he wasn't sure who or what he'd say. Some things were so insane, the only thing to do was ignore them as stubbornly as humanly possible. Jared, we talked once already. I don't want to do this again. But just know that that's a bad policy, and you really should fix that. And he offers for Sarah to stay if she wants for a while. But she sort of apologizes for how she screwed up. She talks about the shaman. And she laments the fact that his mother doesn't like her because she knows that his mother has talent and that she could probably teach her a lot, but is just never going to do that. And she asks why he can see her fireflies, but she can't. And why, why she just doesn't seem to have the abilities that he has. And he's just like, I can't answer. I don't know why I have it. And I think that if he could choose to get rid of it, he probably would. And he offers to pay for her flight to go and see Mrs. Jacks. And the fact that he offers is simultaneously to her something that she loves about him and resents. Which, if you are somebody who has been without a lot of your life and somebody comes into your life who can give things to you, that's really is how it feels. You appreciate them. You appreciate the generosity. You appreciate the things that you are getting that you would not otherwise have access to. But you resent the fact that you are completely dependent on somebody else for them and that they could take everything away at any time. It's just, So how do you, she says, let's pretend you're a normal Joe Blow. How do you explain your bedroom? The cave of creep. I have goosebumps being here. Something's in this apartment. It's close. And Jared tries to tell her it's a ghost, to which Dent is like, she's talking about the fucking thing in the wall, idiot. Thank you, Dent. Thank you. It was so obvious she was not talking about a ghost, Jared. But he's trying to act like that shit isn't there. You can't do this forever and still live here. Come on. And she finally says, when you embrace your truth, let me know, after kissing him goodbye. And I feel like that's the best way to say that. Sarah's right. And she sends him a picture of her hand over her grandmother's a little bit later and lets him know that she got there. So then he starts getting texts from Coda. Mind your own fucking business, spoiled fucking brat. Go fuck yourself. Stop fucking texting. I'm busy, asshole. Some of us aren't fucking coddled suck-ups. Fake as fuck, that's what you are. He just keeps going and keeps going. And Jared, understandably, has his feelings hurt. He is very good about brushing it off when Coda comes to him to apologize. But it's pretty ugly there. And it's obvious that, Coda is lashing out in a way that makes no sense if you know anything about Jared. Calling Jared coddled is one of the most, like, completely off base things I've ever heard. And Hank turns up and he's wondering if Jared's heard from Coda, what's going on with him, because Coda didn't apparently tell Hank where he was even going. And Jared says there's coffee on the counter, doesn't answer him or tell him anything about what he knows. And I think that was a smart move, because it's like Hank is a little bit too micromanagey. You know, people need to live their own lives. And if he's choosing to, like, go down this road, Hank, there's only so much that you can do. You can't force somebody to be sober if that's not something that they're actually interested in doing. So chapter 27, he goes and hangs out with the twins. And let's see, where is it? Hey, are you guys moving in? And they don't answer him. They say, hey, Casanova, is the Weirdo X still here? And are just sort of like teasing him about what she was wearing and the whole thing. He goes home and Dent asks him how his quiz went. And when Jared says seemed fine, Dent's like, you're welcome, which I thought was fair, because yes. And then he hears something rustling and he looks up. Dent disappears. And this fucking thing is coming out of the wall again. And later on, Jared feels this loneliness fill him. And I have to say, we have gotten confirmation that this thing has been around since before Jared moved in. Otherwise, I would wonder if this weren't some aspect of Jared hanging around. I would think, though, if it were, Dent would sense that and would know. But it can't be that, because, like I said, it was here before Jared arrived. I just feel like this thing could be a really nice metaphor for, like, his addiction, basically. Hovering in the background, coming out when you least expect it, and attacking in strange ways. Not always quite visible, but you still know it's there. And it's just, there's this moment of him thinking about the loneliness and abandonment. People he hated, who wished him hard or who wished him harm, or users who wanted something from him, those he couldn't shake. While the people he actually liked vanished like a mirage shimmering in the heat, a hopeful oasis that disappeared as soon as you got close. Which, you know, a lot of people would sort of like, if they were thinking this way, I would accuse them of being a little bit self-pitying. But with Jared, this is 100% true. You know, people, I feel like, are, when they're users, they know who to approach. And that's part of it, is that, like, that's a kind of predator, you know? And Jared is sort of transparent about being somebody that you can mooch off of in that way. So he fucking goes and plays basketball with the twins. And they fucking, in the middle of it, he sees David standing off to the side watching him. And the fact that he's still around. Honestly, David, get a fucking job. Like, go do something. You know? I hate this guy. I wish so much. Because Jared's just glad that the twins didn't notice why he was so distracted. And I'm like, they should, though. You should tell people. You should take his photo. You should point this out. And he's not sharing with people exactly what happened, you know? I think he tells Maeve about David in the alley the other night. But, like, even that, she kind of had to drag out of him. He wasn't going to volunteer that information. It was just lucky that she could read him well enough to tell that something had happened and asked him a direct question, because he doesn't want to lie to her. So when Jared goes over and he's playing video games with them, I could not stop laughing. Their Grand Theft Auto 5 opened normally, but instead of seeing the game from the point of view of Michael in all his menacing and muscled glory, in his place was a giant brown Care Bear with a picture of a cupcake on his chest. Whoa, Jared said. How'd you do that? We had to mod the crap out of it so we could play it in front of our kids. What does that mean for the strip club? Jared said. Things get furry, Pat said. There's a trampoline, Sponge added. Oh my God, that is so funny to me. I would love to see that. I'm sure there's YouTube videos of like mods like that. Owen often goes through and will show me mods to games that he is currently playing, and some of them are so funny. He had been playing Fallout 4, and he showed me like various mods to make characters look like what do you call it? Abraham Lincoln. There was one that like every time you took a shot, it like said something like some Samuel L. Jackson quote. It was just like weird shit like that I was like, who even like wants to take the time to do this? But you know what? Sure, okay. And Olive, the woman whose husband sold all of her stuff, who was having a hard time, needs to go grocery shopping. So she's dropping off her daughter, Eliza, while she borrows Maeve's bug. And Eliza is really not doing great. Like, she is a little girl whose father has disappeared and who has lost most of her possessions and been abandoned. And as little as she is, it's one of those things that you can't comprehend exactly what happened. And adults don't think you comprehend as much as you do, so they don't help you along and talk to you about it. And I'm sure that it's just as difficult for Olive with her having to take care of a daughter. So to a degree, Olive is just trying to hold it together and maybe doesn't have the energy to spare to make her daughter feel okay. Like she's probably just about getting by, you know? So Eliza starts crying, and Dent, who was just so irritated at the idea that he was going to have to turn off Doctor Who, volunteers to turn it off because he feels bad about this little girl crying. Shue appeared, eyes boggled and angry. She only calmed down when Eliza poked her head back out and propped it on her stuffed Olaf. Dent flickered. Shue touched his hand, and he solidified. "Thank you," Dent said. What is that? Again, another thing. Like, she's somehow lending him enough juice for him to stay solid. But I want to know exactly how that works and why Shue has that juice to spare and Dent doesn't. Like, what about her makes her more powerful? Because Dent, we only ever see him behaving like a pain in the ass dude. But Shue at one point, like, kind of unhinged her jaw. So, you know, what is that? And that is something actually I'm realizing now that Sarah had said the medicine man did. I wonder if he was a real person or a ghost or what. So he could hear Maeve and Olive whispering in Maeve's bedroom, but not what they were whispering about. Shue and Dent slowly emerged headfirst from the ceiling above Jared's bed. Dent's eyes were wide. This is so freaky. Can you get out of my ceiling? Jared hissed. My God, Dent said. It's full of stars. What? Again, what does that mean? Dent being shocked by something is very unusual. And why can he only see it when Shue takes him? He's been in and out of Jared's room before. So what is it that causes him to see something that he couldn't before? I don't know. But anyway, Jared, he goes to work. He comes home and there is a meeting going on of the co-op board for the store. They're all sort of arguing. And afterwards, Maeve is in sort of a mood and is thinking about the fact that they're like, sometimes you have to believe in something enough to put yourself at risk, and she could get injured. She will almost definitely get arrested. And it's possible that she could get sued. And Jared's like, wow, I thought I was done bailing people out of jail. And she says, oh, I think I have more arrests than Maggie. And he says, please don't tell her that, which I think that's a good idea. She would definitely see that shit as a challenge. Jared does this really sweet thing because he gets such good grades for physics and for biology due to the tutoring that he was getting from Dent, that he goes and finds Red Dwarf online and torrents it, loads it to a thumb drive, and puts the thumb drive in the TV and leaves Dent alone to do a marathon all by himself. And Dent, like, almost fades completely away out of sheer, like, being touched. It says, Dent became very shy, fading until he was a wisp. Then he solidified and happily sat on the recliner, ignoring Jared for the rest of the night. Oops, sorry, I hit my mic. I love this, that Jared did this. Like, what a sweet... Jared, you little cinnamon roll. So he's, he has just done this, and he leaves to go to his room, and he gets a text from Coda apologizing. He apologizes a couple times, and it just tells him, I was pissed at Hank. I took it out on you. I'm sorry. Like, can I make amends to you? And before they make plans, Jared gets a knock on the door, and it's Barbie asking him if he will come to the dance class. And he kind of, like, because, he doesn't really want to. So he tries to do that thing where he's like, oh, yeah, I'll really try to come, when you really have no intention of going at all. She's pushy about it. And it's like, I'll send my boys to remind you. And he's like, finally has to say, it's not my thing. And she says, your culture is important. Make it a priority. And this is one of those things that, like, 10 years ago, somebody saying your culture is a priority, I would have just rolled my eyes. And now that I really understand the lengths to which colonizers went to erase cultures, I really agree with her. But I also totally understand why, for him personally, it does not feel like a priority. But she's right, So let's see. Oh, yeah. Saturday morning, Jared was making himself an omelet when Olive phoned him. So this is when the whole thing happens with meeting Nika. She is asking if he can help her carry some furniture from this yard sale back to the apartment. And it's so cute. At the garage sale, Eliza was stoked because she'd found a grimy, kid-sized, frozen, fold-out, foamy chair, which she clutched like a baby. And Olive is like, we're washing that, right? And she says something like, you're going to ruin it. Don't do it. I'm like, girl, there's bed bugs in that shit. Let your mama wash it. Meanwhile, Dent and Shu are out here leapfrogging over parked cars. It's like Dent didn't know how to be a ghost until Shu showed him. And at one point, and I am not kidding, a bus passes through him and he screams before he remembers, and then stops and says, oh yeah, I'm dead. And I fucking cackled when I got to that part. There's just something about that line. I just died a little bit. I think it's because Dent is such a fucking curmudgeon most of the time, that to see him genuinely enjoying himself and being kind of whimsical is just such a welcome change that I found it way more amusing than it maybe actually was. So Jared notices this woman who's jogging, and she is really, really hot. She's wearing yoga pants and a sweatshirt. She's got really high cheekbones. He thinks he sees her staring at Dent, but then she just jogs right through him. So he's sort of like, oh, I guess she didn't see him. He turned his eyes slightly to watch her jog away. And a little bit later, She comes up behind him, and she puts a knife against his throat and says, "Hello, Wiegit." And he's like, this jumps into chapter 29. She cuts him and tastes the blood and says, "Witch and trickster." So initially, I guess she thought he was Wiegit somehow, like, shape-shifting. And then she realizes that he's not, but that he has some kind of connection. And she sort of shoves her way into Jared's life at this point. She asks where Wiegit is. He says he doesn't know. And she's like, "Don't protect him." To which Jared's like, "Yeah, I wouldn't. Like, he's a douchebag. If you're looking for him, I wish you all the luck in the world. I am not interested in having him be part of my life. I try and keep him out of my head. I want nothing to do with him," pretty much. So he thinks that he's going to be able to like bail on her and go back to Olive and Eliza, but she pretty much follows him and like introduces herself and is really pretty aggressive. And they go back up to his room and she is startled by the paintings, the whole energy of it. She says, "It corrupts the air." "And you sleep here?" "I do." "Reality bleeds here. It's not that bad once you get used to it." And she asks if he's a shaman, to which he replies, "That's a little personal." Is it? Okay. I just found that so funny. "Your horde of familiars gives you away, shaman. No normal human has so many spirits following them." Okay, whatever. What do I need to do to get you to leave? Oh, Jared, listen to her. Why can't you just listen? I know you don't know who she is, but seriously, it doesn't, like, she can see everything you can see and she's telling you some shit that you clearly don't. Like, just fucking, even if you decide in the end to toss aside whatever she says, fine. But listen initially, So she starts to question him and he's resistant until she's like, "I will be gone the sooner you just tell me what I want to know." And she asks if he can hear Wiegit in his head and project some of her own thoughts into his head, to which Jared is just like, "Can you not?" And she tells him to tell Wiegit, "Tell him we want our skins back." He shifted slightly away from her. "What are you?" "Otter." He sprang from the couch and ran. Yeah. Guys, when she said otter, I out loud just went, "Oh, shit." That was one of the moments when Owen looked up and was like, "What?" And I tried to explain to him and, it just really isn't the same. And she uses magic as he's running to force him into a standstill. And he is starting to panic and have like a bit of a PTSD thing. I was a little surprised that he didn't just leave his body again, because I kind of thought that might happen. And she tries to tell him, like, "We're not river otters. We are in the ocean." But this is not particularly encouraging to him at this moment. And he does wind up throwing up. He wished his mom was there. She had no patience with the supernatural bulldozing into her life. She had hexes and curses she tried to teach him, but it didn't make any sense to him. Magic was another language, and he had a tin ear. He barely made it through French, and everyone told him if you spoke English, learning French was a snap. Which, no, it's not. Who told you that? So she says, when he asks, "What do you mean you lost your skins?" She says, "I thought you had secrets, but you don't, do you?" And he says, "No, I don't. And I'm not good with magic, so I just sort of leave it alone." And she finally says, "I realized you spoke at one point," because he says the woman on TV with the hair that goes around hearing the dead. And she's like, "I don't get what you're even talking about." Why would you want to know anything about me? There's a website full of people who'd talk your ear off about their dad Wiegit. Go bug them. Yes, but you are the only one we've never heard mentioned. We have talked to all of them. Not one of them's heard we get in their mind. No one answered me when I talked to them mind to mind. And he seems to think that she's saying he's not human, and he's insisting that he is. And she's like, okay, maybe you are. But regardless, you're the closest that we've gotten to Wiegand himself in a long, long time. And he's realizing, oh, you want to use me as bait so that you can talk to him. And when she takes his phone from him, she asks for the password and he doesn't want to tell her, but she's able to like take it right out of his mind and then start flipping through the fucking texts he gets. Rude. And then when he's arguing with her, she tells him to just go to sleep, and he does. And he wakes up a little bit later and she's cooked for him. Now, this is the part, again, where I am like, have such mixed feelings, because I don't like that she came barging into his life. I don't like the fact that she's like taking it upon herself to investigate him in a way. I don't like the entitlement, but she is taking care of him in a way that nobody ever does. Even Maeve, who is giving him somewhere to stay, doesn't do this sort of thing that takes attention and care in a specific way. Cooking for somebody is a particular way of showing that you really care about them. And it's just not, you know, the most his mother did was like making like mac and cheese and stuff. And she talks about the protections that had been laid on him by not only his mother, but Sophia, which he didn't know about. And he gets a little bit emotional finding out that she, despite him not actually being her grandson, went out of her way to do something like that for him. And when he asks, what makes you different than the river otters? If you're just trying to use me as bait for Wiegand, she says, I want to be your friend, which she proves to be true very literally. She does ordinary things, adding her number to his phone, becoming his Facebook friend, but then she like takes fingernails and hair clippings and uses them for some sort of like spell. She calls it a finding spell. I would imagine it's to find Wiegand because he seems so closely related in a way that is unusual. And she is still really weirded out by the paintings on the walls in his bedroom. She calls it disturbing. And I do not care for that. He talks about the thing in the wall coming out and sucking on toes. And she rightfully is like, well, this is horrifying. This is magic run amok. And as she's talking about this, one of the painted cars on the wall turns its headlights on and off, which is not something that he has ever seen before. And he just sort of says, well, that's new. And she's like, this is really bad. And he makes a joke and she's like, oh my God, you need to take this more seriously. What are you doing? And basically what it comes down to, he says, is they are kind of comforting to me. And I don't want to hurt them, the faces in the wall. Like, I don't want to paint over them because I feel like that's hurting them. But the one that's like crawling around on the floor, if you want to whack that one, you go ahead, because that one I don't like. But these little like bouncy heads, these are fine. I am so weirded out by this whole thing. Oh my God. And the fact that nobody gives him a straight, like she says, reality bleeds here. What does that mean? Nobody actually tells him anything. They just tell him how freaky it is, which of course, like, that's very obvious. You're not being helpful here, guys. But I wish somebody would give him like an actual piece of usable information about what is going on. But maybe they just don't have one. I don't know. I feel like Dent does, though. And Jared just straight up doesn't ask Dent because he doesn't want to know. Anyway. So, yeah, that is the end of the final chapter. But I am just dying. Like, he keeps on oversleeping too. And I'm still really believing in that theory that I had, that something is drawing on him for energy somehow. I don't know how that would even work, but I still feel like that's true. So, all right. Well, that's where I'm going to leave it. But thank you, Robin, again, very much for this commission. I'm really enjoying this book. I liked the first one a lot, but it was so sad and depressing so much of the time that this one has a bit of a lightness to it that the other one didn't have, that's allowing me to like just sort of absorb things in a different way. So, yeah, I'm really liking this. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you're enjoying the coverage, and I'll be seeing you in soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.